He used to say God cried whenever I resisted. We grew up in a Catholic boarding school that felt more like a prison than any kind of school. But you know how it is, right? Poor folks, single mom, no real options. When the church offers you a bed, some food, and a shot at salvation, you say amen and thank them on your knees. That's exactly what my mom did. Handed me and my brother over with a kiss on the forehead and a "be good, the priest is a man of God." Oh yeah, man of God. God must have been on vacation back then. The school had the prettiest name, St. Joseph of Light. Lovely, right? But anyone who ever lived there knows the only light in that place came through the cracks in the rotten roof, and when it did, the priest would shut the curtains. To avoid distractions during prayer, he'd say, and we believed it, believed it because we needed to, because it was easier to think all that was part of God's plan than to accept we'd become toys in the hands of men who wore robes to hide their filth. My brother was the quiet one, always had been, like the world had warned him early on it wasn't safe. Me, I was loud, always asking questions, which meant I got slapped more often too. Girls who talk too much grow up to be lost women, the priest used to say, and I'd think, guess I've been lost since birth then, 'cause my tongue never fit inside my mouth. The priest, let's just call him that, since he loved the title, even though he was more like the devil's business partner, had this weird habit. He liked calling us at night, one by one, said it was to talk about faith. Ain't no faith talk starting after 10 p.m. behind locked doors. But back then, we didn't know any better. With me, he said I needed to learn obedience, that God was testing my silence. With my brother, he said he was training a real man's strength. Strength, huh? So much strength my brother couldn't take it. I remember the first time he got called for that so-called spiritual strengthening. I saw him come back to the dorm with red eyes and pale as a ghost. I asked if he was okay. He just nodded and buried himself under the blanket. He never slept right after that. Never laughed again either. For a while I thought maybe I was just being dramatic. Maybe it was just a phase. Kids scare easy, right? But then one night, he called me too. Just some random night after the rosary. Grabbed me by the arm with that fake smile of his. The kind where only the teeth move. Tonight's your turn, little flower. Flowers, right? He loved flowers. Had a whole garden in front of the chapel. Trimmed them nice and neat. Too bad he treated people like flowers too. The kind you can rip petals off just to see how long they last. In that room he always spoke softly, slowly. Said the body was a temple. That some temples needed to be touched to understand divine love. I didn't get any of it. All I knew was it hurt. Not physically, not yet. It was some weird kind of pain deep in my chest. Like shame mixed with the urge to vanish. I'd pretend I didn't feel a thing. 'Cause if you cried, it got worse. You learn that fast. Then came the routine. Morning prayer, afternoon punishment, nighttime silence. And in between, the meetings. Me and my brother, yeah, we became his favorites. Maybe 'cause we were the quiet ones, or the loneliest, or maybe just 'cause our mom never called. One letter a year, and she even spelled our names wrong. One night, my brother came back with a cut on his hand. Said he fell down the stairs, but I knew, 'cause the priest loved punishing anyone who tried to run. And my brother, he started trying to run from himself. Spent hours staring out the window. Stopped talking, ate barely anything, started hiding during playtime. One day he whispered to me he wanted to disappear, said maybe if he made it to heaven, God would believe him. I told him heaven was for the obedient, and he laughed. The only laugh I got from him in those last few months of his life. The last time I saw my brother was a Saturday morning. He was in the cafeteria, staring off into nothing, and me, being an idiot, snapped at him for not washing my cup. "You're gonna die before me," I said. He just smiled, like he already knew. On Sunday, they found him hanging behind the laundry storage, said it was an accident, Said he was probably just playing hide and seek, but come on, nobody strangles themselves with a t-shirt for fun. Even the nuns pretended to believe it. It was easier that way. At the funeral, the priest cried, real tears, looked convincing, said my brother was a special boy, said God called him early 'cause he had bigger plans. I stared at his face and thought, maybe God did call him, but it was you who shoved him, you filthy bastard. I didn't cry at my brother's funeral, just looked at him in that ugly little coffin, face all pale, like it had been for months already, and thought, he's free now. But what about me? Some classmates sobbed in the corner, nuns prayed, and the priest stood there, looking like some holy man who'd lost a son. And me, I wanted to puke on his shoes, but I held it in, not out of respect, but it's 'cause the cafeteria served liver stew the night before, and nobody deserved to see that mess. After it was all over, they buried the coffin way back in the school cemetery, right behind the teacher's bathroom, in that overgrown patch where even weeds looked sad, and life just went on, like nothing happened. My brother's body left, but his shadow stuck to me. That's when something snapped inside. Up until that day, I was just another obedient kid, one of those who keeps her head down, swallows hard, makes the sign of the cross, and pretends it's all fine. But after the burial, I stopped praying, stopped lowering my head, started staring people dead in the eye. And let me tell you, people in charge hate it when you look them in the eye. The priest noticed. Oh, he noticed all right. Barely a week after my brother died, he called me to the little reflection room. I went in silent, sat in that wobbly chair that always felt more like medieval torture furniture. He shut the door, like always. But this time, I didn't flinch. He started with the same old crap. You're feeling your brother's absence, aren't you? And I said, yeah, but honestly, I'm feeling your presence even more. He paused, gave me that smug little smile, like he's never heard the word no in his life. Then came the line I never forget. You need to trust me, Margaret, just like your brother did. Oh, I wanted to get up and smash that damn chair over his head, but I didn't. I breathed, because any woman who survived hell knows revenge is best served ice cold. And that moment right there, that was the first course of my frozen feast. I started watching everything. His schedule, where he walked, who he talked to, who he invited after Mass. I kept mental notes of the names, kept an eye on what disappeared from the pantry, and on the letters he secretly sent to the nuns. Yep, he did that. Said it was faith stuff, but I saw one of those letters once with a barely erased little round sketch, kind of pointy at the tip. And trust me, no kind of faith lives in a sketchy little tip like that. I also started listening to the other girls. Didn't ask anything, just let them talk. When one of them came back from the little room with puffy eyes, I'd sit beside her, sneak her some bread from dinner, and just say, you're not the first. Some looked relieved, others got mad, 'cause some folks need to believe everything's fine, even when the floor is giving out under their feet. I get it. I used to be like that too. That's when I started my plan. First, I went to Sister Paulina, oldest nun in the school. Looked like a veiled mummy, but sharp as hell. More importantly, she hated the priest. Didn't say it out loud, of course, but you could see it in the way her eyes narrowed every time he opened his mouth. I approached her real gentle, soft voice, all poor grieving girl vibes. Then I let it out little by little. Sister, the priest been saying some weird things. She looked at me like she didn't want to get involved. Just asked, weird how? And I said, stuff that burns, but not on the body. In the soul, oh honey. She got it right away. Shook her head, gripped a rosary like it was a lifeline, and said, some souls need fire to be purified. And that's when I knew. She knew. She knew everything, and she chose to look the other way. But I didn't give up on her, because one thing I've learned, cowards will help, as long as you make it seem like they won't get burned for it. So I started planting seeds, slipped little notes under the teacher's office door. Letters written in messy kid handwriting like they came from different children. Simple stuff like, the priest asks questions I don't understand. Or, why does the door need to lock, sister? Every now and then, I'd pass the prayer room and leave a candle burning in a hidden corner with a note underneath, in memory of those who were still alive outside but dead inside. Poetic? Maybe. But nuns love a little religious drama. One day the priest called me in again. I could tell he was suspicious. He'd sniffed out that someone was spreading little truths as in the cracks of that holy building. I walked in with steady legs, but inside I was one bump away from shattering like a cracked tile. I sat in that chair that's probably heard more sins than a brothel confessional. Dim light, door shut behind me, with that heavy, you're screwed kind of click, and him once again, starting his little performance. You've been acting real rebellious. That's not good. I stared him dead in the face and said, the cross I carry, Father, you helped carve it. That's when his mask slipped. Didn't even last 2 seconds. He twirled his rosary like it was a damn knife and got right up close. You're spreading poison, Margaret, and in God's house, snakes don't get to stay. I thought he'd just yell, make me say 50 Hail Marys, maybe stick me on dish duty as punishment. But no, babe, what he did next, that wasn't punishment. That was a warning. First thing they did was move me out of the girls' dorm, said I was corrupting the innocence of others. Threw me in this tiny dark room, no window, used to be where they stored the dirty robes from Mass. All that was in there was a thin mattress and a bucket in the corner. I slept surrounded by mold and wet cloth stink, no light, only the nun who'd slide me cold food twice a day without saying a word, and at night, him. Second thing, he made me kneel on cold stone for hours, and when I said my legs hurt, he smiled. Suffering cleanses the soul, Margaret. Don't you want to be pure again? Oh, of course. Who doesn't want to be pure? After days without eating, with bloody knees and a soul that's already in pieces, there were days he made me scrub the chapel floor with a toothbrush. If I slowed down, he came at me with that thin leather belt of his, not to teach, like he claimed, to mark. And boy, it marked, turned purple, then green, then yellow, like my skin was a traffic light trying to warn folks that faith had gone too far. One night, he woke me up in the middle of what he called a prolonged reflection, said it was time to learn bodily humility, made me strip out of my uniform and carry a 20-kilo sack of flour around the courtyard in circles. It was raining. He said it was symbolic. You're the burden of this school, Margaret, so carry your weight. Sister Paulina saw. Oh yeah, she saw. Watched me from the laundry window, then turned away, because to them, suffering meant God hadn't given up on you yet. But me, I was starting to give up on God. By day 5, he beat my palms with a wooden ruler until I couldn't even close my fingers. Said it was to teach me not to write lies. I screamed. He said my screams were prayers. The louder you cry, the higher the angels hear. No angel came down, babe. All that rose up in that room was the stench of sweat and pain. And when it was all over, or I guess when he decided I'd been broken enough, he shoved me back in with the rest, like nothing had ever happened. Even said with that fake tired saint face, Margaret is renewed. The penance worked. After that punishment, I stopped. Stopped talking, stopped pushing, stopped looking anyone in the eye. Stopped dreaming too, if I'm honest, and not by choice. He broke whatever was left of me with that fake holy torture. Kneeling till your skin splits, carrying weight through the rain in the middle of the night, falling asleep with aching knees and a heart that hurts worse. That stuff sticks to your body like an invisible tattoo. Every time I touched the sheets, it felt like the pain was mocking me. Gonna fight back again? Think you're tough now, girl? And me, who used to burn secret notes for fun, now I could barely light a prayer candle. The whole class saw the change. Some girls whispered I was acting weird. Others stopped looking at me altogether, afraid to catch whatever it was I was carrying. 'Cause, a girl who stands up to authority becomes a curse, and nobody wanted to be next. Of course, the priest noticed real quick that I was quiet, but instead of leaving me alone, he decided silence was just another opportunity. He started calling me in more and more, not just at night anymore, sometimes right after breakfast, other times during class breaks. Some days it was 3, 4 times, and always in that so-called faith room, as he liked to call it. But faith, the only faith in there, was his belief in getting away with it. And he always locked the door. Always. That first time he called me in after the punishment, my legs were shaking. I was still sore, bruised, palms swollen, knees burning. I walked in silent, and him smiling. "You learned your lesson, didn't you, Margaret?" I didn't say a word, just nodded, because with him, anything I said could turn into a twisted confession. Then came his little ritual, slow, patient, like he already knew how it was going to go. He'd come closer, run his hand through my hair, whisper that God had a new plan for me, that my suffering was like Mary's, that I was chosen, honey, like a ripe fruit on the tree, the kind he thought he could pick whenever he felt like it. And yeah, I did try to fight back. There was still a shred of strength left in me. On the 2nd or 3rd day he called me, when he came closer and started his proximity prayers. That's what he called it. I pulled my arm away, tried to leave, told him I had cramps, that I needed to go to the bathroom. That's when he crouched down, stared right into my eyes and said, "God weeps, Margaret. God weeps when you resist the path he's prepared for your soul. Do you want God to cry because of you?" That froze me, because he didn't yell. He didn't threaten me directly. He played with the guilt. Twisted faith, and a kid raised with a Bible in hand. She believes everything, especially when it's coming from a man in robes. From that day on, I stopped resisting, not because I accepted it, but because pretending it was normal hurt less than fighting it. Then came what he called the constant purification period. He called me in nearly every day, made me kneel, made me close my eyes, made me repeat prayers he just made up on the spot. Some weird mix of psalms and words I didn't even understand, but that burned when they came out of my mouth. I started walking weird, legs pressed together, because even the fabric of my clothes hurt when it touched me, burned, like the cloth had turned into sandpaper. Even the breeze felt like it was mocking me. And you know what the worst part was? When I walked out of that room, no one said a thing. No one saw, or they pretended not to. I passed the nuns. They looked away, walked past the girls. They stepped back like I had leprosy, but at least for a while. He left me alone outside of that room, didn't call me rebellious anymore, didn't hit me, didn't make me carry sacks or buckets, just purified me. And I acted like it was the price of staying alive. But there's one thing he didn't count on. Even someone pretending to be broken might be putting themselves back together inside. And every time he locked me in there, every time he said, "God wants you silent," a voice inside me whispered, "All right then, let's see what God does when I open this door from the inside." After months locked in that cursed cycle of punishment dressed up as prayer, I thought I'd become just flesh walking around, quiet flesh, obedient flesh, flesh at peace. But what nobody could see was that deep down, way under the bruises and silence, the old Margaret was still alive, tiny, twisted, but alive, and burning with rage in every fold of her soul. And let me tell you, babe, rage has a smell only those who felt it know, like dried blood mixed with broken promises. The routine turned into a show: breakfast, class, purification meetings, more class, punishment by silence, dinner, every day. Almost like clockwork, I already knew the exact time between the last word of Mass and the click of that little room's lock turning, and it was in that boring rhythm of rehearsed torture that I started noticing the other girls. One in particular, Cecily. Cecily was new. hair paler than flour, voice so thin you could barely hear her. And it took just 2 weeks for her to start walking like me. Slow, distant stare, avoiding sitting down. Oh, I recognized it immediately. That same walk, that same silence, that same guilt that ain't yours, but clings to your skin like a tattoo made with thorns. One day, I caught her in the hallway, coming back from the little room, and grabbed her arm. She froze, eyes wide like she thought I was going to hit her or snitch. "Cecily, he's calling you too, isn't he?" She didn't answer, just bit her lip and started crying with her eyes. Because some crying doesn't fall, it just burns from the inside. And right then, I made up my mind. What happened to me is not going to happen to her. I could have stayed quiet, could have left it all as it was. But then my brother popped into my head that last time I saw him, pale, staring at his plate like it made him sick. And Cecily had that same face. And I thought, if I shut up now, I'm part of it. So I started fighting back, slowly, quietly, like leaving crumbs for a rat to sneak out of its hole. First step, I started leaving anonymous notes inside the nuns' Bibles. Simple words, but sharp. He says it's part of God's plan. The soul screams and no one hears it. How many girls need to stop walking before someone sees? I signed them in shaky, childish handwriting so they'd think it came from one of the younger kids. Because nuns love protecting the little ones, and if they think it's a secret, even better, becomes a holy mission. Second step, I started pretending to lose my mind, talking to myself near the teachers, laughing in the middle of prayer, whispering strange stuff to anyone who passed by. "Did you see the angel enter the little room last night? He was crying. The priest says God smells like sweat. Have you smelled it yet?" The nuns began whispering. Some made the sign of the cross when I walked past. Others told me to pray more, but none of them dared ask what I meant, because they knew. And when you know and still do nothing, well, you're guilty at the altar too. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday. I remember, because Thursdays were for the group rosary, and it was right after the prayers that I saw him heading to the little room, but this time with Cecily. That hit me like a punch straight to the chest, like someone pulling loose stitches in a wound that never closed, and I thought, either I bust that door down right now, or I'll be dragging this silence with me for the rest of my life. I waited 10 minutes, just enough time for him to start the ritual, as he liked to call it. And then I went. I crept down the hallway, barefoot so I wouldn't make a sound, looked both ways, empty. Only thing I could hear was his muffled voice coming from inside. I grabbed one of the flower pots from the chapel window, one of those saint statues he liked to take care of. St. Jude, of all people, the patron of lost causes. Or the irony, held it tight, aimed at the lock, and wham! Threw it with everything I had. The door burst open from the shock. He screamed. Cecily was curled up in the corner, and me, I was standing there, chest puffed up, months of hate boiling in my veins. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Enough? Just one word." But it carried everything I'd never been allowed to say. It carried my brother's buried scream. It carried every night I prayed, wondering if God was asleep or just pretending. He jumped up like he'd seen a ghost. His face went pale like communion bread, and before I could take another step, he slapped me so hard the whole world spun. Yeah, it hurt, but not more than life already had. And as if that wasn't enough, he ran to the makeshift altar in the room and grabbed a crucifix, big wooden one with a sad-eyed Jesus on it, started yelling in Latin, throwing salt on me like I was straight from hell. "She's possessed. It's the enemy. Get out, spirit of lies. Get out, spirit of temptation." And me, I just lay there on the floor, mouth bleeding, eye already swelling shut, staring up and thinking, how long are they going to keep pretending I'm the devil? That's when 3 nuns came running in, Paulina in front, holding a Bible like a sword, and the other 2 clutching their crosses like holy armor. Looked like some kind of holy version of the 4 horsemen. "Grab her! Paulina yelled, and they did, one on each arm, yanking me back like I was some wild animal. I screamed, thrashed, "It's him, not me, it's him." But they'd rehearsed this show a long time ago, hadn't they? Everyone already knew their lines. And in this little drama, I was the demon. They started reading the Bible out loud, psalm after psalm, like every word was meant to crush me. She's been touched by the serpent. She's tainted. And me, lying there, with holy spit flying in my face, finally understood the real evil was right there, wearing long skirts and waving a Bible. Because there's no demon scarier than the one who carries a holy book and hides his trail of pain behind faith. They dragged me like some rabid dog through the nun's hallway, Bible shaking in one hand, crucifix swinging around like it was some kind of metal. She snapped, they said, lost her mind. But the truth, I wasn't losing my mind. I was waking up. They threw me in some locked-up room, walls covered in mold, air so heavy it felt like a funeral mass. Gave me a thin blanket and a pitcher of water. No explanation, no doctor, just a sweet little promise that they'd pray for me. Oh, what a blessing, right? Thinking a prayer makes up for justice. I stayed there for 2 days, 2 whole days of forced prayers outside the door, tearful hymns at 5 a.m, and food shoved under the door. Cold, tasteless, just like their faith. They didn't let me see Cecily, didn't let me see anyone. Only one who showed up was Sister Paulina, with that fake merciful look on her face that made me want to shove her rosary down her throat. "God is watching, Margaret," she said, and I'd say, "Let's hope he sees better than you do." On the 3rd night, while I shivered with fever and rage, I heard heavier footsteps. Wasn't a nun, wasn't the cook. It was the devil in a robe, coming to finish his sermon. The door creaked open. He stepped in, silent, no cross, no Bible, just him, sweat, and that smug look like he still thought he was in charge. "You've caused quite a scandal, Margaret," he said, voice soft, like someone used to doing things they shouldn't to people who can't fight back. I sat up slowly on the bed, never breaking eye contact. My eyes were probably red or empty, but alive. "The town's gonna find out," I said. He smirked, that little grin people make when they think they're playing chess against someone with one leg. "Who's gonna believe you?" And right then, it all clicked. He knew he was untouchable, knew that in that town, his name came even before God's, because people trust loud voices at the pulpit more than they trust whispers in the dark. But he also knew I wasn't staying quiet. That's why he came, to try and kill the fire before it became a blaze. He tried everything, said he'd transfer me, said he'd talk to my mother. Poor woman probably didn't even know I was still alive, even offered me a brand new Bible, like that was gonna patch the holes in my soul. But the one thing he said that stuck with me was right before he left, "You were the worst of them all, because for a moment you almost made me believe you were different." And I laughed, really laughed. One of those laughs that only happen when you've run out of shame and sanity. "The thing is, Father, I was different. That's exactly why you're gonna fall." Next morning they released me. "Recovered," they said. For who? No idea. Even the walls didn't buy it. They put me back at the girls' dorm like nothing had happened. But the girls knew. They could tell by the way they looked at me. Some with fear, some with hope. But all of them knew the silence I carried was too damn loud to ignore. Cecily stopped talking to me. Not her fault. Blame it on fear. That paralysis that sinks into your skin and convinces you silence is safer. And maybe it was. But for me, it was too late. I'd already opened my mouth. And now I was going to scream till the holy walls of that prison came crashing down. So I got to work. Simple, quiet, smart. First thing, I sent a letter. Not to my mom, not to the cops. To a woman, an ex-nun who'd been kicked out for disrespecting church authority. One of those who got too old to swallow lies and became a sort of forgotten relative. of the town. I remembered her from a one-time literature class. She read a Simone de Beauvoir excerpt out loud and almost got stoned for it. I knew if anyone would listen, it'd be her. In the letter, I told everything. No names, but all the details. Every forced prayer, every act of purification, every line they made me swallow with my guilt. I signed it with a nickname only she knew, because once she told me I looked like a girl who sees behind the curtain, and since then she'd call me Margaret from backstage. I smuggled the letter out through the cook. She probably thought I was nuts, but she loved sweet bread, and she got one every week for every letter she carried without peeking. Holy bribery, it works. Then I started poisoning the school from the inside. No more little notes. Now it was questions. Have you ever been called to pray alone? Have you ever had to promise to keep a secret, to keep going to Mass? Do you feel pain when you sit down too? No one ever said his name. Never. But just one girl raising an eyebrow, and I knew exactly who carried the same silent wound, and there were many of us. My rage turned into a web, and a web, sweetheart, once it catches fire, no priest in the world can stop it. It took weeks, but one day, while I was washing dinner forks, I heard the whisper, "There's a reporter in town." I looked over at the nun in the kitchen. She was shaking, pretending she didn't hear, but she was shaking. At the end of the week, this man in a suit showed up, with a woman carrying a leather folder and eagle eyes. Said they were from the diocese doing a pastoral visit. Yeah, right. They were undercover inspectors. I knew it, because the ex-nun wrote back, the one I'd hidden a letter for, inside a library book. She said she was gonna plant the scandal right where the priest thought he was harvesting obedience. And she did exactly that. They called me in to talk, alone of course. White room, hard chair, fake smile. "Margaret, we just want to know if you're okay." I looked them straight in the eye and said, "Well, depends. Do you want the right answer or the true one?" Silence. The woman opened her folder. Papers, signatures, reports. Other letters had arrived. Other girls had written. Some were former students. Some were mothers who couldn't explain their daughter's strange behavior. And just like that, the house began to crumble. Not all at once, though. Church scandals don't knock things down. They wrote them slowly, quietly, behind pretty curtains. But still, it crumbled. The priest? Gone. They said he was transferred to a spiritual retreat in another state. Oh, of course, because what better way to deal with a monster than by turning him into a guru? They changed the school's name, swapped out the nuns, painted the walls. But me? It took years to paint over what he'd carved into me. People think when the truth comes out, it brings some kind of happy ending, right? Like the girl survives, the priest runs away, and everyone claps. Well, let me tell you something, sweetheart. The truth doesn't save anyone. It just changes the kind of cross you have to carry. They kicked me out of the school like I was patient zero for the plague, called it a relocation. Like I was some lost package they needed to reroute. Dumped me into a public school in the next town with a nice little letter saying I'd suffered a spiritual crisis. Oh, sure, a spiritual crisis. As if what I went through was some faith-fueled hallucination and not a grimy-fingered, sane-voiced nightmare. They put me in a kind of group home just for difficult girls. Difficult for who? No one ever said. Some had run away from home. Others saw things. A few talked to themselves. Me, I just had a broken body and a head full of shards. And on the very first day, I saw exactly what kind of care I was about to get. At the new school, they called me the priest girl, but not with respect, with mockery, with disgust. The boys would yank my hair in the hallway and say I belonged to the devil, that I made the whole thing up, that no priest does bad things. Only girls who want attention do. One of them pushed me on the stairs and said he wanted to see if I screamed like I did in the confessional. The teacher saw it, did nothing, just fixed her glasses and pretended I wasn't there. because the problem wasn't me falling, it was me existing. The girls weren't any better. You like trashing priests, huh? Bet you enjoyed it. You're crazy, just like they say. Some days I came back to the boarding house with torn clothes and a soul in pieces. No one wanted to sit next to me. If I walked into a room, people moved away. If I raised my hand in class, they'd laugh. Even the teachers whispered, "That one's from the Catholic school. They say she makes stuff up. Look at her eyes, she's seen too much." And me? I went silent. Not because I wanted to, but because when everyone calls you crazy long enough, you start doubting your own scream. At the boarding house, it was worse. The place was old. The floor creaked. The walls were stuffed with more sad stories than a confessional on All Souls Day. There was a girl who cried every night, another who slept with a knife under her pillow, and me, I dreamed about him, dreamed about the little room, the crucifix, the smell of his robe, his cold hand gripping my shoulder. I screamed in my sleep, punched the wall, woke up gasping, tangled in the bed sheet like a noose. The housekeeper would scold me. "Girl, you're disturbing the others. If you want to stay here, stay quiet." Stay quiet, always that. From the very start, the only advice the world ever gave me was, pretend it was nothing, pretend it passed, pretend it was just a dream, but even dreams have limits, and mine were way past due. School kept being a damn circus. One day during recess, a group of 3 girls cornered me, started laughing, said I should show them how to please a priest. Before I even processed it, slap right across the face, hard, then another and another. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground with blood in my mouth and the full awareness that no one was going to help me up. There were 2 teachers in the courtyard. 2. And what did they do? Nothing. Just turned their heads like saying, "Well, you asked for it." And yeah, I found something that day. I found rock bottom, the deepest I've ever had the misfortune of meeting. But I found something else too. Anger. The good kind. The kind that glues your pieces back together. It took time. A lot. There were nights I thought about running, vanishing, leaving the whole world behind, 'cause it felt like the only way to erase it all was to disappear myself. But then I'd remember my brother, that pale little face of his, whispering he wanted to vanish too, and I'd think, if I disappear now, he died for nothing. And right there, in that cramped little room with stuck windows and a mattress that smelled like old sweat, I made a promise. If the world won't hear me, I'll scream anyway, even if I have to whisper until it echoes. Then one day, out of nowhere, no warning, no letter, no heads up, someone knocked on the door of the group home. It was the house manager, all out of breath, banging her knuckles on the table where I was pretending to do homework. "Margaret, you've got a visitor." I nearly choked on the nothing I was chewing. A visitor. For me, that alone already felt like a miracle. But when I stood up and walked to the front hall, my legs froze before my eyes could even process it. It was her, my mother, the woman who gave birth to me, dumped me at that boarding school with a limp kiss on the forehead and a half-hearted blessing, and never came back to check if I was even still breathing. There she was, standing there with a worn-out purse on her arm, a shapeless dress, and eyes that looked like they'd seen more graveyards than birthdays. She looked old, not in years, in soul, worn down, like a rag you use to scrub floors until it falls apart. And me? Oh, I was an idiot. I got emotional. I really thought this was it, the big turnaround, that now, finally, my mom would say, "Sweetheart, I'm sorry. I came to take you home. You're coming back with me." I believed it because that tiny thread of hope still tripped me up, even after everything, after the priest, the school, the nuns, the girls who hit me, the boys who yanked my hair, the teachers who ignored me. I still believed a mother was supposed to save you. But honey, let me tell you something. Some mothers don't save. Some mothers shove. She looked me up and down, not with love, with judgment. That weight loss. You're pale, and you look like someone who doesn't pray anymore. That's how it started. I tried to smile, tried to hug her, but she turned to stone, cold and stiff like a gravestone. She sat down, pulled a handkerchief from her purse, wrapped it around her wrist, and started talking. And what she said, look, to this day I still wonder if it was just a hallucination, because that right there was the cruelest slap I've ever received, and it wasn't even physical. Yet, your brother died because of you. That's how she opened. Just like that. Plain and simple. Cold, harsh. If you had just kept that filthy mouth shut, he'd still be here. I froze, couldn't say a word. My throat locked, my hands started to sweat. And she kept going. You spread lies, dragged the name of a man of God through the mud, and tore apart what was left of this family. The priest, the only thing he ever tried to do was save us. And you went and spat in his face. And me, I just stood there, listening to all of it and thinking, how? How does she not know? How does she not see? How can't she feel that he wasn't some savior? He was just a predator who fed on the silence. But she kept going, fast, sharp, spitting words like venom from a mouth full of rage. Your brother was weak, sure, but he wasn't sick. He got that way after you started running your mouth. He cried, said he was hearing voices, said God was going to punish him, and you, instead of shutting up, kept pouring gasoline on the fire. And that's when it came, the slap. No warning, sharp, right across the face. So you learned to bite your tongue before you dragged the name of a holy man again. And honestly, it didn't even sting that bad on the outside. What hurt was knowing that deep down, I'd still been hoping for a hug, but what I got was a hand, and not to hold, to hit. I couldn't even cry, just stared at her, one thought pounding in my skull. Did my brother try to tell her too? Because the way she talked, the way she denied everything, the way she twisted every piece of what we lived, it hit me. A thought that froze my insides. What if he told her? What if he had the courage and she just ignored him, just like she was ignoring me now? And babe, that was it. That last tiny drop of hope I had inside me. It evaporated, gone. Right there in that room, with the sunlight coming in sideways through the window, the sour smell of the boarding house mixing with her old perfume. I buried what was left of my mother. She kept talking, rambling nonsense, quoted a psalm, quoted a priest, said something about the good of the family, told me I should apologize, said God might still forgive me, and all I could think was, has he already forgiven you for abandoning me, for ignoring your son's screams before he went silent forever? But I didn't say a thing, because some truths, babe, don't fit in the mouth of someone who's still trying to survive. She got up, didn't hug me, didn't say take care, just fixed her scarf and left with the same coldness she walked in with, like she'd come to complain about a damaged delivery. And I just sat there, face stinging, chest torn open, heart in ruins, but alive, more alive than ever. Because that day, I finally understood. Pain doesn't disappear, but it changes places. And when it does, you learn to wear it around your neck like a war medal. After my mother left that stinking group home, the smell she left behind wasn't hers. It was the poison she planted in her words. Because if you think the slap hurt more than the things she spat in my face, you've clearly never been the daughter of someone who believes more in priests than in their own blood. She walked out without even looking back, and the caregivers, oh, they were already locked and loaded. There were 3 of them, Lourdes, Heresy, and a newbie they called Little Sister, but her hands hit harder than a wooden clog. They didn't beat you like nuns. They beat you like women pissed at life, finally finding something to take it out on. But now it wasn't just for nightmares or being rebellious. Now it was for anything. Literally, if I took 2 seconds too long in the shower, you want to stay in there? Fine, maybe you'll learn to obey. Smack soap still in hand. If I didn't eat their tasteless gruel fast enough, too good for this food, you spoiled little demon, wham, spoon to the mouth. They'd learned over time where it hurt the most without leaving marks. A holy education, right? The new rule was simple. Say anything about the priest, you get hit. Look like you're thinking about him, you get hit. Breathe wrong during Mass talk, kneel on dry corn, and pray 50 Hail Marys. Yep, one night they made me strip down to my nightgown and kneel on corn kernels in the middle of the empty dining hall to cleanse your filthy soul with shame. It was cold, and the floor bit at my skin. I was shivering, but they said it was the evil inside me trying to leave. To them, the evil was me wanting to speak. A week later, they took away my notebooks. You're writing too much. You'll end up writing lies. And oh, I wanted to say, like the lies you read every day, but I didn't, because there was a bucket of cold water just waiting for the wrong answer. And when you live surrounded by women with church faces and prison guard souls, the wrong answer is anything that isn't silence. One morning, I woke up with a metallic taste in my mouth. It was blood. I had bitten my own lip in my sleep, grinding my jaw through a nightmare. Got up with a swollen mouth, walked into the kitchen holding my face, and one of the women looked at me and said, "What's that now seen spilling out of your mouth? Little snake?" And she laughed. And they all laughed. You ever been the punchline in the one place that's supposed to protect you? It's like living on a sinking boat and still being forced to smile while rowing. Sometimes I'd pretend to have a fever just to stay in bed and skip group prayer, because every time they said his name, the priest, I felt a weight on my back, like someone still had their hand pressed there, but faking a fever just gave them another excuse. Don't want to pray? Then kneel until God gives you a real fever. And off I went, kneeling for over an hour, forehead pressed to a moldy wall. The wet floor made my legs go numb, but my mind stayed sharp, wide awake, drawing revenge with the tip of my bitten tongue. You brought shame to this family, Margaret. Your mother told me this girl only learns if she gets beaten the right way. So that was it. My mom didn't just give them the green light. She wrote the damn rule book with clauses and footnotes and everything. Nights turned into prime time for despair. Not because I was scared to sleep, but because I was scared of what they'd do while I slept. There was one night, I'll never forget it. I woke up with a wet cloth over my face, thought it was a nightmare. But when I pulled it off, I saw the 3 caretakers standing over me. Night bath to cool your head, they said. Then they dumped the whole bucket, ice cold, the bed soaked, my skin shaking. I stayed there, curled up on that mattress, listening to them chant psalm after psalm like I was some chicken ready for spiritual slaughter. And my only reaction? I laughed, low, dry, sarcastic. One of them snapped, "What you laughing at, Snake?" I said, "I'm laughing you 'cause you're more scared of me than I am of you." And it was true, because only people afraid of truth need to beat it into silence. Only the guilty try to cast out demons that were never there. And if you've made it this far, babe, you know what to do. Leave a like. They always say words have power, but no one tells you that power is dangerous, especially for the ones who live to control, silence, erase. After weeks of being their nighttime punching bag, their living Bible for punishment, their crash dummy for pain ordered straight from my mother's cold heart, I started to feel sick of fear. Yeah, nauseous, sick just from knowing I'd spend another day pretending, praying through clenched lips, and sleeping while begging not to dream too loud. And when even fear starts tasting sour, you know it's time to flip the game. I still had a pencil, tiny thing, tip all chewed up from nerves. And I had one folded piece of notebook paper hidden deep in my suitcase lining, tucked between 2 torn shirts nobody dared touch. And I started with one sentence, simple. I know what happened. Wrote that first line in the middle of the night, lying on the cold floor because my bed was soaked again. Penance bath number 34. I know what happened. And every time I read it, it felt like my chest let out just a bit of the weight. Then I wrote it all down. Everything I remembered, Everything they never let me say, but not as a letter. I wrote it like a story, like it was about some other girl, because that made it easier, safer, more bearable. The girl had a brother. The girl got dropped off at a boarding school. The girl had her soul crushed, her body silenced, her mouth punished. The girl wanted to scream, but they found out she knew and did everything to break her. But she wrote, in secret, in the dark, between one slap and the next. I wrote about her with so much rage, so much sarcasm, so much irony that it became the only way I could breathe. Writing became revenge no one could see. And babe, invisible revenge is the most dangerous kind there is. Every night, a new page. I kept them all, folded up, tucked deep inside the ripped pillow they wouldn't touch, because they said it smelled like sulfur. If they'd known it held pure truth, they'd have burned it with a church candle. Then one day, it happened. Dona Lourdes walked into the room in the middle of the afternoon. I was just sitting there, pretending to fold laundry, and she saw one of the papers on the floor. She picked it up, started reading. She looked at me and said, "This is made up, right? Tell me it's made up." I just gave her a little smirk and said, "Depends. Do you want it to be?" She tore up the paper right in front of me, stepped on it, spat on it, but that's when it hit me. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of the story, because girls, they'll hit girls, but stories have legs, they have wings, and one day they fly. That night, I stuffed what was left of the pages into my sock. Yeah, my sock, because if they caught me again, I was ready to scream so loud, even the plagues would sound like prayers. I started thinking, writing wasn't enough. I needed someone to read it. Someone who didn't carry a Bible in one hand and a leather strap in the other. That's when I had a crooked little idea. But the best ideas come from desperation. The school, that damn school where everyone pretended I was crazy, where the boys called me Eden Snake, where teachers acted like I was invisible. That place had a library, old, dusty, with a locked cabinet full of books no one read and a lost and found box nobody touched. Next week, I took my pages, folded, neat, wrapped in notebook paper, with a cover I'd drawn by hand in pen, and I left it there in the box, all the way at the back, with a little note. If you've got the guts to know what they did to a real girl, read this. I walked away shaking, but lighter. I didn't know who would read it. Didn't know if they'd laugh, tear it up, or use it to line their shoes. But for the first time, I had let my story go into the world. And the world, honey, could deal with it however it wanted. It was a Wednesday, one of those days where the sky's so dull, it feels like even God's just waiting to clock out. I was sitting in the schoolyard, cold butt on cracked stone, eyes locked on a cloud that looked like a dead bird. I wasn't expecting anything. No good news, no slap, no new punishment. I was deep in that whatever mode. The kind where, if the ground opened up, I'd just ask if it was warm down there. That's when this woman walked up. Didn't clap, didn't call my name, just stood there, staring. I looked back at her, didn't even move. She had the face of a government worker who'd seen so much crap, nothing shocked her anymore. But her eyes, they weren't nun eyes, or principal eyes, or those judgmental teacher eyes that think traumatized kids are just lazy with attitude. Margaret Jefferson, she asked. Oh, great. Another one. My brain was already loading my go-to answer. Not me. I've been dead a while. But before I could spit out the sarcasm, she added, I'm with the state team. I read some of your stuff. Pause. I froze. But not the scared kind of freeze. This was the kind of freeze that says, well, damn. Looks like it finally landed in the hands of someone who doesn't wear a robe and carry a prayer cloth. She sat next to me without asking, pulled a half-crushed folder from her bag, packed with stapled papers and red pen scribbles. You leave this in the library? She asked, pointing at one page. It wasn't one I had memorized, but I recognized the handwriting, rage folded into every line, sarcasm wrapped inside that final amen. Maybe, I said without flinching. She pulled out another page, and another, then a rough draft with my crooked handwriting and a line at the bottom. If someone ever reads this and gets it, let me know. Because I still don't? She looked up again. I'm giving you a heads up. That's when I knew. This woman was different. She didn't look at me like some poor thing, didn't call me a little snake. She looked at me like someone who understood that what I went through wasn't some overreaction, it was survival. She asked if I wanted to go somewhere else to talk, and I remember thinking, wait, there's somewhere else besides school and the boarding house, 'cause so far, all I've known is prison with snack options. But I went. We got into a car with no AC, smelled like mold, and had 2 dusty mint tablets glued to the dashboard. We ended up in a simple room, scratched up table, 2 mismatched chairs, and a tissue box in the corner, practically screaming, someone already cried here. But I didn't cry, didn't even think about crying. She handed me a pen. Write down what they never let you say. No fear, no filter, no priest, no nun, no mom. And I froze, not from fear, from shock, because it had been so long since anyone gave me anything without demanding silence in return. That pen felt heavy, not because of the ink, but because of what it might unlock. I started writing slowly, didn't start with the worst stuff. I began with the day I saw my brother staring into nothing, pale as a ghost. Then I worked my way back. The priest, the little room, the punishments, my mom, the women at the boarding house, the nighttime baths, the things they said while I screamed in my sleep. She deserves it. She just wants attention. God's fixing her. I even wrote about the corn. Yeah, because kneeling on corn in a filthy kitchen, wearing a torn dress, that's not just trauma, that's a symbol. When I finished, I handed her the page. She read it in silence, let out a sigh here and there, but she never made that poor baby face I hated so much. Number. She looked like someone counting bullets in a revolver. At the end, she asked, "Do you want to file a case?" I looked up. "A case? You mean sue the past or something?" She laughed. "Not the past, but the one still messing up the present." And I thought, well, if we're lighting up dry grass, I'll bring the match myself. I said yes. She explained everything, said we'd need other testimonies, that she'd try to find former students, other girls who went through the same thing. And yeah, it was gonna take work. It would hurt, it would expose me, but it was my chance to write the ending, my way. I walked out of that place with my head boiling. Was I scared? Hell yeah. But now I had paperwork. And paperwork, babe, not even a priest can rip that up with a scream. 4, maybe 5 days passed. After that strange talk with the social worker, I was back at the boarding house, of course, looking like I knew something was about to blow up, just not sure how big it'd be. The caretakers looked at me like they could smell trouble, but hadn't found the bomb yet. I pretended I was the same, but inside, I didn't shake anymore, because when you survive all that and write it down, you don't just survive, you become dynamite. Then, one random morning, the social worker showed up at the door. No asking, no prayer, no fake smile. She came in holding a thick envelope with a tall woman beside her, dressed like someone who handles serious stuff. "Margaret's coming with me," she said. "From today on, this house is no longer responsible for her. Dona Lourdes tried to argue. Her mother's under court restriction. Any contact will be considered a violation." That sentence hit the room like thunder. Restricted. The mother, the one who hit me, handed me over, ignored me, and sent handwritten notes asking them to fix me by force. That was the first time I truly felt it. Justice can wear a skirt with lipstick and a canvas bag full of official papers. We went straight to an orphanage on the other side of town. It wasn't like the boarding house, and definitely not like the school. That place didn't pretend to be a house of blessings, but it also didn't pretend that pain was a sin. There were no prayers, no crosses on the walls, no priest at the door, but there was something I'd never seen before. A real look, a real one. The girls who lived there all looked different on the outside. Blonde, black, short, skinny, quiet. But inside, they all had the same stitched-up soul. No one had to ask anything. All it took was a glance. You could see it. The way they crossed their arms over their chest. The way they flinched when someone walked behind them. The way they laughed and apologized in the same breath. The way they walked like their bodies still hurt in the places no one could see. Every girl there had a man in her past who locked the door with her inside it. Father, uncle, stepfather, brother, grandfather, neighbor, pastor, stranger, or in my case, the one in a robe who said, "God cried for my soul." And you know what hit me the hardest? No one was shocked by my story. Not one eyebrow raised. Quite the opposite. During my first week, one of them, Talisha, brought me hot tea and said, "We heard what you did. Thank you." I went silent. She smiled, with a gap where her tooth should be. "You spoke? That's already more than half of us ever managed." And right then, honey, I cried. But this time it was different. It wasn't that desperate, hopeless cry. It was the kind of crying that comes from finally understanding that speaking isn't wrong. It's brave. In that place, we didn't call each other poor thing. We called each other alive. Meanwhile, outside, things started to burn. The social worker began the process, one case at a time. The priest's name made its way back into the documents. Turns out he was removed for health reasons right after my first report. And get this, honey, he didn't even serve a full year in prison. 1 year, less than it takes a plant to bloom. While I was collecting slaps, breakdowns, nightmares, kneeling on corn, and getting cold water dumped on my back, he got a damn sabbatical. Worse, when he got out, they relocated him to another place, another church, with another name, like monsters in robes get a free pass to start over with a new address. But now he had a name, a written story, more girls. The social worker and her team found other former students. Some cried during their statements, others pretended not to remember, but at least 6 confirmed. It was always in the little room with the door locked. He called it private prayer. Some even used his exact phrase, intimate faith moment. If only faith was just that. Hell would be packed with pastors and a clean soul. And then, my love, came the bombshell, the letters. They went after my mother. Of course she denied everything, said she never knew, that the priest was a holy man, that her son was disturbed, that I was a liar since birth. But someone in the family, some distant relative who collected old documents, found a box. Inside, letters from my brother to my mother, and her replies. His were desperate. He comes into my room at night. I'm scared. Please take me away from here. And hers? Cold. Stop making things up. You're imagining things. Don't say anything to Margaret. She's too sensitive. Priests don't do that, especially not with the boys. If it was with your sister, I'd at least understand more. Yep. With the sister, maybe it was acceptable. With the son, it was scandal. The mother who hit me, locked me up, sent people to discipline me like an animal. She knew, and she chose to pretend, so she got charged too. Negligence, omission, cover-up, and no amount of prayer could stop that train, honey, because when the proof is written, signed, and dated, not even Jesus takes the blame for someone else's sins. The trial started on a clear morning. A rare thing, right? Usually the sky looked like it had a hangover or was stuck in some gloomy Sunday mass. But that day, even the weather seemed ready to see things clearly. I walked into the courtroom wearing the same clothes I used for tutoring classes at the orphanage. Because, let's be real, you can't dress up like a survivor. You just show up with your body and what's left of your breath across the room. Him, the priest, but not in a robe, now in a cheap suit, sagging belly, thinning hair, and glasses that couldn't cover the washed-out face of someone who still believed that saying, "Oh man," was enough to erase everything. The judge asked his name, age, occupation. He answered, "Retired spiritual educator." Retired, babe. Like he chose to stop what he was doing. Not that he was forced to by a court case. When they called me up to speak, his lawyer stood up immediately. "Your Honor, I ask the court to consider that this witness has a history of psychiatric admissions and erratic behavior, known for delusions and confusion since her teens." And I thought, of course, the crazy one, the coward's favorite card to play. The judge looked at me. "Do you wish to respond to that?" I said, "Absolutely. Crazy? Yeah. Crazy enough to believe a man of God could touch little girls and call it faith. Crazy for surviving punishment, slaps, humiliation, nightmares, and still thinking I was worthy of love. Crazy for speaking up, for screaming, for writing. Crazy, sure, but never a liar." Silence. The courtroom went dead quiet, but in the eyes of a few women sitting there, I saw it. They knew. They knew what it felt like to be called insane just for telling the truth. After me came the other girls, now women, some trembling, some standing strong, but all with one thing in common: the same little room, the same locked door, the same sentence before it all began: "God is here." One of them, Cecily, yes, that Cecily from the boarding house, looked him dead in the eyes and said, "I wasn't crazy. I was just a kid, and you took advantage of that." Another former student said the priest used to tell her she had to suffer to deserve heaven, and that her eyes needed to learn not to look back when he walked in. The judge kept writing. His lawyers got paler by the minute. Then came the nuns. Yes, babe, some of them. The ones who used to turn their heads, the ones who pretended to be too busy to notice. Now they were there. One of them, Sister Jonas, said she used to hear noises coming from the little room. Muffled screams, heavy breathing, furniture being dragged. She said she asked about it. And what did he say? "Don't get involved. This isn't women's business. It's God working through me. You just pray. The rest is faith." Faith, huh? Faith behind locked doors. Faith that hurts. Faith that silences. Faith that kills. The verdict came a week later. Guilty. This time for real. No transfers. No new name. No reassignment to another parish. And even though he was old, they jailed him. Not for long, because justice gets ashamed of itself sometimes, but long enough that he couldn't hide anymore, couldn't erase, couldn't pretend. My mother, she got charged too, for neglect, for covering it up, for ignoring her own son's letters and calling his pain hysteria. The letters were submitted as evidence. Her responses read aloud. Some people cried, others looked furious. I didn't cry. I just sat down and closed my eyes, because that day my brother was finally heard. The one who died thinking he was crazy. The one who left this world without ever knowing it wasn't his fault. And there, in the silence between the verdict and the exit, I thought, I hope wherever he is, he knows that the truth came out, that it was never his fault, that he deserved love. Because real love, I only got to know it much later. It took me years to believe someone could look at me without judging, without trying to fix me, without trying to shut me up. But it happened when I was 17, still in the system. I got adopted by a couple, simple people, no fairy tale, but good people, people who looked you in the eye. They didn't ask about God. They asked if I wanted more rice or more beans, if I was cold, if I liked to sleep with the door open or closed. Little things, but they feel like miracles when all you've known is punishment. With them, I learned love doesn't have a loud voice, or a heavy hand, or rules. It just has care. And that's when I realized my brother could have had this too, but he didn't, because he left with guilt glued to his chest, without ever knowing what real affection felt like, without knowing it didn't need to apologize for trying to speak up. I grew up, graduated, studied psychology, and later I met a man, calm, nothing magical at first sight, but his eyes, he looked at me like he understood the weight of things left unsaid. And the best part, he didn't try to fix me. He just respected me. We got married. He never forced touch, never asked why I turned away when someone reached for me too fast. He just knew. The body remembers too, and his respected mine. We never stepped foot in a church, not once. He understood. He knew that, for me, a temple felt like a cell. We didn't have kids, but you know what I do have? The gift of recognizing that look. When I see a quiet girl with that weight of the world stare, I go to her, speak softly, offer her a pen and paper, or a cup of tea, or just a space with no questions, because I know the power of one voice, just one, that believes in you when the world calls you crazy. And if my voice can be that for someone, then everything they did to me wasn't for nothing. If you made it this far, sweetheart, leave a like. And if one day you see a girl sitting alone with her eyes lost and her soul hurting, don't ask, just listen. Because listening saves. Listening even saves the ones who think they've already died inside.